Part 18. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 171. Station your team near the enemy's base, usually with the intention of launching an attack soon. Although there are crack generators in the Allied bases, blocking the radar signals of the Allied forces, Wang Ling still saw from the electronic map those corners of the Allied forces outside the shielding range, as if there were a lot of troops gathering towards the intersection. Deployed, and seemed ready to fight against the Wolf Squad. However, Wang Ling just sneered a few times and did not order an attack at all. The Wolf team just stayed here and did nothing for a long time. The Allied forces base did not dare to withdraw the troops stationed there, so they could only waste their time with the Wolf Squad. After a long time, when it was getting dark, the Wolf Squad finally sent out some troops and headed towards the Allied base with great momentum. Upon noticing the movements of the Wolf team, the garrison soldiers immediately cheered up and prepared to fight. But in the end, these damn guys from the Wolf Squad had just gotten close to their fire circle, and before they even entered, they turned around and went back. This sudden scene made many of the guarding Allied soldiers stunned. It took them a long time to realize that they had been tricked. At that moment, everyone gritted their teeth. There were even troops requesting to go out to fight to wipe out the Wolf Squad, but they were eventually rejected. This approach was naturally Wang Ling's bad idea, to play tricks on the Allies when he had nothing to do. As for the actual attack, Wang Ling did not dare to be so hasty. This Allied base is not simple either. If it is attacked by force, the casualties will definitely be huge. The most important thing is that Wang Ling still doesn't know which force this Allied base belongs to, and what unique military units or buildings it has. This kind of unknown mystery has to make Wang Ling wary. After it was completely dark, the Allied soldiers who were guarding them gradually withdrew, and it seemed that they did not expect the Wolf Squad to attack again. But Wang Ling decided not to follow common sense. At this time, he dispatched more than 10 mobilization troops, and even Rhino tanks and Apocalypse tanks, and rushed over aggressively. Although there was a record of being fooled, the Allies had to pay attention to the offensive lineup of the Wolf Squad. At that moment, the soldiers guarding became vigilant again, setting up their machine guns and preparing for the attack. However, this time the Wolf team didn't even get close to their fire circle. They actually intercepted one of their time travel mining vehicles on the way, destroyed it with 3 strikes, 5 divided by 2, and then walked away, back to garrison point. This time, although the fire was indeed fired and a minecart was damaged, the guards still felt like they were being played. They were all so angry that they wanted to shoot the wolf right away. Squad, but those requests to play were repeatedly rejected. They had no choice but to watch the Wolf team jumping around before their eyes. Wang Ling, who was so stubborn when he came up, seemed to have made up his mind to fight them here for 2 full days. In the past 2 days, the Wolf team was dispatched several times, but almost every time they came back and killed 4 of their mining trucks, making the guarding soldiers furious. It just didn't work without guarding. One time they seemed too lazy to take care of it and didn't do much defense. As a result, Wang Ling temporarily ordered a 3-star Apocalypse tank to withstand the attack of 2 light prism towers. In an instant, a machine gun at the intersection was dropped. The bunker then immediately retreated back, slowly recovering its health, but the guards and Allied forces were collectively so angry that they almost vomited blood. Naturally, this green Allied base was not completely without thoughts of counterattack. They sent out 2 waves of intruder fighter planes, but only 2 at a time. As a result, all the shells of these intruder fighter planes were dodged by the 3-star tanks. All were shot down by anti-aircraft crawlers. After this, the Allies never sent fighter planes to bomb again. 2 days later, in the evening, Wang Ling sat in front of a temporary tent, picking at his chin, checking the electronic map, and muttering, "Are these green Allies from bastards? It's so tolerable, and nothing has happened for 2 days as." In the past 2 days, he had been blocking the exit of the base. Although he meant to harass and mislead them, in fact, deep down in his heart, he still wanted to lure Tanya out. Although Wang Ling is not Tanya's opponent now, those 3-star elite tanks in the Wolf team can easily kill Tanya instantly. Although Wang Ling did want to kill Tanya with his own hands, this was a battlefield after all. If Tanya could be lured out and killed in advance, even if he didn't do it himself, it was his fault, so he could barely accept it. However, Wang Ling did not expect that the space would be so cowardly. In the past 2 days, except for the 2 dispatches of invader fighter planes, no troops had been dispatched to encircle the Wolf team, let alone Tanya. Boring. After struggling for a long time, Wang Ling finally shook his head and lay down to rest. But at this moment, he suddenly discovered that there seemed to be some movement outside the green Allied base in the electronic map. When he looked closer, it turned out that 5 Grizzly tanks were gathering, and there were nearly 20 Allied troops. Soldier. After enduring these 2 days, the green Allied base finally couldn't stand this cowardice. Is it planning to send troops to encircle and suppress it? However, these encirclement and suppression troops did not pose much of a threat to Wang Ling at all. Since it's coming, let's swallow it. Wolf Squad, all attention, prepare to fight. Wang Ling smiled sinisterly, waved his hand, and quickly commanded the troops to set up a formation, ready to respond to the enemy at any time. The formation was set up, and the Allied forces base was finally assembled. Then they rushed out of the base in a mighty manner and rushed straight to the Wolf team. The fastest ones are naturally the Grizzly tanks, but what greets them are 2 Apocalypse tanks and 3 Rhino Tuckers lined up in a row. 4 of them have even reached the 3-star elite level. Even behind the tank, Wang Ling was sharpening his sword with a group of mobilized soldiers. After holding back the fire for 2 days, these 5 Grizzly tanks are not afraid of death, and they are also dedicated to attacking hard. The 5 concentrated fire targeted a 3-star Apocalypse tank. However, they were not able to fire many cannons at all. The explosive shells of the Apocalypse tank and the Rhino tank had already poured out. With the rumbling explosion, within a moment, all 5 Grizzly tanks had been destroyed, and the Apocalypse tank that was being targeted only lost less than half of its health. Later, the group of Allied soldiers finally arrived, and this time not only the Apocalypse tanks and Rhino tanks, but also the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles opened fire. Wang Ling also led a group of mobilization soldiers to fight back. Powerful under the suppression of firepower, the group of Allied soldiers persisted for a shorter time. They were completely wiped out without causing much damage to the Wolf Squad. This even resulted in 2 new recruits of the Wolf Squad being directly promoted to 3-star elites. Among them, there was Gu Suanwu. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 172. In this era of war, no one dares to say that they can survive 100%, but if they become stronger and stronger, reaching the 3-star elite level, then the chance of survival will naturally be much greater. Now, No 001 Gu Suanwu and number 102 Li Tong, these 2 old comrades have all been promoted to the 3-star elite level, which has greatly improved their survivability. Wang Ling felt a little relieved in his heart. On the other hand, the Green Allied forces had more than 20 Allied soldiers and 5 Grizzly tanks. In the end, they were unable to kill even 1 soldier and 1 tank of the Wolf Squad. After this result, the entire base became depressed. Seeing the strength of the Wolf Squad, the teams that had been petitioning to go out finally silenced their voices. Yes, the current Wolf Squad is indeed too powerful. If the charge troops go to encircle and suppress them, ordinary teams are no match at all and will only be counterattacked in the end. If they want to successfully annihilate the Wolf Squad, they can only win with numbers. Of course, there is no shortage of resources on this battlefield. After such a long stalemate, this base has also accumulated a lot of funds. However, it is not worthwhile for them to spend a lot of money to produce a large number of tanks just for the Wolf Squad. As a last resort, the Green Allied base simply stood still and never sent troops to encircle and suppress the Wolf team once again. It was just a stalemate with them. During the stalemate, another 2 days passed. During these 2 days, only 2 time travel mining vehicles were driven out of the Allied base, and both of them were blown up by the Eagle Squadron. After these 2 days, Wang Ling finally felt bored. While he resented the space in his heart, he also strongly despised it, and even had a faint intention of quitting. After all, there is no point in continuing the stalemate like this, and there may even be a joint encirclement and suppression by several bases. The Wolf Squad is strong, but it cannot resist so many encirclement and suppression troops at once. However, just as Wang Ling was thinking about the time to retreat, he accidentally saw from the electronic map that a large number of troops were dispatched from another coalition base, as if they were about to attack the Allies. These troops include about 40 conscripts, 3 magnetic blast infantry, 5 Rhino tanks, 2 anti-aircraft crawlers, and 1 Apocalypse tank. There are even some 3-star elite soldiers and more than a dozen 1-star veterans. Although this lineup is not as powerful as the Wolf Squad, it is not weak. It is probably the strength of an entire squad from another coalition base. What do they want to do? Wang Ling was a little confused. This lineup is okay, but it seems to be lacking in attacking the Allied base. Do they really want to attack? In doubt, Wang Ling simply stared at the map and observed. This team was not as cautious as the Wolf team when marching. The first 2 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles separated from the team far away. After several hours of trekking, they stopped at the Yellow Allied base within the sphere of influence. Not far away. At this time, if the Allied forces are willing to send out troops to encircle and suppress them midway, I am afraid that this team may not be able to confront the enemy head-on and may be annihilated. After all, this battlefield is too big, and the distance between the various arms of this team is too far, and it is easy to be divided and annihilated. However, the Allies obviously did not have this intention. Just like when the Wolf Squad first advanced, these Allied bases still stood still and seemed to turn a blind eye to the approaching squad. But Wang Ling is very concerned about it. After observing it for so long, he has probably determined that the target of this team from another coalition base is the Yellow Coalition base. With a force of this size, they dare to attack an entire base. I have to say that this team is very brave. Originally, with the deterrent of the Allied base's light prism tower and numerous troops, even with the strength of the Wolf Squad, Wang Ling did not dare to launch a general attack easily. But after seeing this team, Wang Ling had some thoughts. After thinking about it for a while, he finally made up his mind. Wolf team, retreat. Right now, this Green Allied base has made him feel boring, and there is no point in encircling it any longer. He might as well do other things. Although they were retreating, the Wolf team had no tendency to return to the base. Instead, under Wang Ling's instructions, they retreated a few kilometers away from the 2 anti-aircraft crawlers and stopped. The Wolf team was almost under the nose of the Allied forces before, much closer to the battlefield than the other team. When they all retreated here, that team still only had 2 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and 5 rhinos. The tanks are still at least 2 hours away from here, and the group of mobilized soldiers is much slower. At this time, the Wolf team was relaxed. They only occasionally sent troops to attack the Allied mining trucks in nearby mines. The overall look was somewhat like the presence of an old god. Of course, the actions of the Wolf team can also be seen by the Coalition Base Command Post and Major General Li Weiqing. Over the past few days, the 3 of them have seen how difficult the Wolf team is, and they are even gloating about what happened to the Green Allied base. But now, the Wolf team retreated, but did not return to the base. Instead, they settled in that useless place, which made them confused for a while. In the end, Zhao Pingwang knew Wang Ling better. After looking at the movements of the other team on the map, he suddenly understood, does the wolf team want to attack the yellow allied base with that team? Huh? This is really possible. Rovitsky looked at the map video and was very dissatisfied, but this is too bold. His wolf team is strong, but it is still too reluctant to use this to attack the allied base. Come on. Besides, the commander didn't give him such an order. This time, not only him, but also Major General Li Wiki frowned and stared at the video for a while, then simply contacted him via radio. Wang Ling. Sir. Wang Ling heard Major General Li Wiki's voice and quickly gave a military salute in the direction of the base. General Li Wiki had a sullen face and his tone was full of displeasure. If you don't target the green allied base now, why don't you go back to the base? What does it mean to be stationed there? Do you really plan to unite that team to attack the allied forces? Base. Wang Ling was somewhat embarrassed that his thoughts were predicted, but it was only a matter of time, and Wang Ling did not shy away from anything. That's right, sir. Nonsense. As expected, Major General Li Wiki cursed when he opened his mouth. When did I give you this humming order? Before you besieged the allied base, I turned a blind eye and just turned a blind eye. Now I don't care about you, just kick my nose on your face, right? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 173. Right now, Major General Li Wiki was really angry. He now fully understands Wang Ling's stubbornness. From the moment he first entered the base, after Wang Ling passed a competition, he asked for instructions to mobilize troop numbers without authorization, and later petitioned to move the Allied oil production plant. Siege the Allied base. Now, without any orders, they are trying to join forces with another force to storm the Allied base. This kind of behavior simply felt out of control. Even Major General Li Wiki couldn't help but get a little angry after seeing it repeatedly. However, since Wang Ling dared to do this, he was naturally confident. He had already thought about his rhetoric and immediately replied, Sir, if that team hadn't appeared and looked like they were going to attack the Allied base, maybe we are already on our way back. But the war is changing rapidly. If we don't seize the opportunity to hit the enemy hard, the war will be dragged out for a long, long time. And the longer the time goes, the more brothers we will sacrifice. Although there will inevitably be sacrifices in war, but can you bear to watch so many brothers and subordinates die in battle? Major General Li Wiki stared at Wang Ling in the video with very sharp eyes, but did not answer anything for a while. Taking this opportunity, Wang Ling continued, Sir, I will not joke with my brother's life. No matter how strong the wolf team is, I don't think we can successfully capture an entire Allied base. But now is an opportunity. Although the overall strength of that team is not as good as ours, the lineup cannot be underestimated. Moreover, with them playing in the front line, they can also share a lot of pressure for us. By the way, they can also test the defense of the Allied base. Power. If this base is really difficult to attack, we will not risk our lives, but once a hole is torn into the Allied base and the defense deployment inside is successfully exposed, that will be our chance. At this point, Major General Li Wiki closed his eyes and raised his head slightly, seeming to be considering something. Wang Ling didn't hear the reply for a while, and he gave his last assurance, Sir, if we really attack, I will bear the consequences. If we succeed in conquering, I don't want these military achievements, but if we lose, I will let you do whatever you want. With these words, Wang Ling was equivalent to issuing a military order. After hearing this, Major General Li Wiki finally opened his eyes burning, okay. Upon hearing this word, Wang Ling and Zhao Pingwang laughed, while Rovsky looked anxious. Later, Major General Liwicki added, "Wang Ling, remember what you just said. This kind of willfulness will not be allowed to happen again. Once the wolf team attacks, if more than half of the casualties are lost, the Allied base cannot be successfully captured. Then go wherever you came from, go back and keep raising dogs." Yes. Such cruel words made Wang Ling's brows jump, but fortunately he finally agreed. Wang Ling quickly made a military salute and agreed. Wang Ling still has some confidence in this war. If it really doesn't work, he can still retreat in time when the situation is bad. "Sir, why did you agree?" But Rovitsky was confused at the command post. "This is too risky." Major General Liwicki glanced at him expressionlessly, and then looked at Zhao Pingwang meaningfully. A slight smile suddenly appeared on his tense face. "Look at Xiao Zhao next to you, that's an example. Why did their battlefield end so quickly?" Rovsky glanced at Zhao Pluto, who was smiling slightly, and said a little impatiently, "But the scale of the war is different after all. After all, the enemy forces there are not as strong as here. But Team Wolf is stronger than before." The corner of Major General Liwicki's mouth curled up slightly, allowing Wang Ling's nonsense is a dangerous move. If it fails, it will hit us hard, but if it succeeds, it will severely hit the enemy. This confrontation pattern is sustainable now. It's been too long, it's time for a change. After finishing speaking, he turned his attention to Wang Ling in the video, looking very interested. It's strange to say that Major General Liwicki even wanted to kick Wang Ling when he scolded Wang Ling before, but now that he agreed to the request, he began to look forward to it. Even Major General Liwicki said this, so what else could Rovitsky have to protest? I could only spread my hands and stare at the video. On the battlefield, after obtaining the final consent, Wang Ling finally had no worries anymore. The old god was leaning next to the Apocalypse tank, while he was still observing the situation of the coalition team on the map. After about 2 hours of continuous movement, the 5 Rhino tanks finally arrived near the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and stopped. After another 2 hours or so, the Apocalypse tank also arrived. After another 2 hours, the group of infantrymen finally merged with the tanks. At this time, it was getting late in the Red Alert world, but obviously, the main event had just arrived, and Wang Ling did not plan to return to the real world to rest today. It was not even sure whether he would sleep tonight. As for the coalition team, although they were together, after all, they had traveled a long distance and the infantry were a little tired. They stopped at that place and rested for half an hour. Under the leadership of one of the 3-star elite soldiers, the entire team finally launched the attack towards the Yellow Allied base on the mountain. As expected, the target of this team is the Allied base. After the actual attack, Wang Ling became too careless and quickly stood up, carefully watching their battle on the electronic video. After all, their victory will directly determine whether the Wolf team will attack the Allied base. It was observed in the video that the captain of this coalition team also had a lot of experience in fighting the enemy. He did not let the anti-aircraft crawler take the lead and die. Instead, he hid behind the team and followed slowly. The first ones to clear the way were a group of mobilization troops. After all, their temporary station was very close to the Allied base. Even with the speed of the mobilization troops, they quickly reached the Allied fire circle. So, the battle started in an instant. The first one to launch the offensive was the Allied light prism tower. The 2 light prism towers at the intersection were connected in line, which increased the range and power. One conscript was killed in an instant. After charging up, the second conscript was also killed. Died in response. And the group of mobilized soldiers, facing the light beam, moved forward for a certain distance again. The Allied forces have spy satellites that can view the entire map. Naturally, they know that this small team is coming. They have gathered resisting soldiers at the intersection in advance, and all of them have opened fire at this time. Also firing with them were the 2 machine gun bunkers. Under this triple firepower, almost all mobilization soldiers in the coalition team were killed one after another. 7 or 8 people died in a matter of seconds. These casualties were not unbearable. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 174. Brothers, hit me hard. After all, the Allied base is located at a high place, so the line of sight and fire range are naturally much farther than usual. When they opened fire, the Allied team could not touch them at all. But after several people were sacrificed one after another, the mobilization soldiers of the coalition team finally charged into the fire range. Under the shout of their captain, the soldiers of the entire team began to fight back. Fire snakes flew between the 2 sides, leading to there was a lot of blood, mixed with 3 electromagnetic attacks and 2 light rays. This battle was particularly fierce. In terms of weapon comparison, the machine gun firepower of the Allied forces was obviously higher than that of the Babisha submachine gun. Coupled with the spraying of machine gun bunkers and light prism towers, the coalition team was severely frustrated, and soldiers were killed and sacrificed at all times. However, the main attack method of this team was not this group of soldiers. Just as the fight between the 2 sides was in full swing, the team's tanks finally rushed here. The 5 Rhino tanks and 1 Apocalypse tank took advantage of the mobilization troops to attract firepower. Without hesitation, they began to focus fire on the machine gun bunker. They quickly demolished it under continuous bombardment, and then another machine gun bunker was built. Also followed in the footsteps. After that, the 6 tanks began to change their targets again and attacked the light prism tower. The 2 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles hid beside the mobilization group, specifically attacking the defending Allied infantry. With the firepower of the mobilization and magnetic blast infantry, although some soldiers were killed from time to time, on the whole but it also maintained a balance with the enemy. Taking advantage of this time, the 6 tanks had demolished 1 light prism tower and began to focus fire on another one. At this time, the light prism tower finally gave up on mobilizing soldiers and started shooting at the Rhino tanks. But there were so many Rhino tanks and Apocalypse tanks that a single prism tower couldn't cope with it. In the end, it only knocked out half of the HP of the Rhino tank and was blown up. Those flying wreckage brought up lines of fireworks in the air and fell to the ground with a sonorous and powerful sound. At this intersection, the defensive facilities have been demolished, which seriously affects the Allied defense strength. The Allied soldiers who are resisting at the entrance are also stunned. But then, they launched a fierce attack and started shooting desperately, trying to stop the progress of the coalition team. However, these alone could not stop the coalition team. The 6 tanks had already joined the battle circle after clearing the defensive buildings, and followed them to focus fire on the coalition soldiers. In the end, the coalition team successfully tore through the blockade at the expense of 2 Rhino tanks and nearly 20 mobilization troops. Then the remaining forces of the team drove straight in and broke into the Allied base. And the unexplored area shrouded by the crack generator was finally partially explored. As can be seen from the map video, the defense force inside this Allied base is also not weak. Machine gun bunkers and light prism towers are built in many places. Although the number is not too many, they are widely distributed. In addition, there are many soldiers and tanks inside the base. After the battle, these troops are also gathering at this time to try their best to resist the coalition team. In addition, you can also see many various types of buildings distributed inside the base. Among them, the power plants that Wang Ling is most interested in have a large number, and the number of troops and defense buildings distributed around them is also very small. This actually made Wang Ling interested. The firepower of that coalition team is not bad, and the lineup is reasonable, but it is still fanciful to destroy the Allied base like this. At best, it will only make the Allied forces feel sick. However, it is not just their team that is eyeing this allied base right now, the wolf team, for example, is also keeping an eye on it. After looking at the battle situation and checking the situation inside the allied base, Wang Ling finally showed a sinister smile. The opportunity has come. If you are targeted by me, your base will be finished. Wolf squad, gather. Then, Wang Ling waved his hand and gathered all the scattered wolf squads. He gave a pre-battle lecture. Brothers, do you know why I named the wolf squad? Wolf squad, 1 or 2. Hungry wolves are nothing to be afraid of, but when a group of us gather together and join forces, we will fight a family. No one dares to ignore the fighting power that can be unleashed. Now, the battle is coming, and there are already people fighting for us. I fought in the front line and brought out my wolfish spirit. I must win this battle. Oh. Oh. The lecture was very brief, but when these words were spoken before the war, the entire wolf squad was like a pile of dry wood touched by a spark, bursting into blazing fire in an instant. The war was imminent, and the coalition team might not be able to sustain it for too long. Wang Ling didn't waste any time. With a wave of his hand, the wolf team headed towards the yellow allied base. Just like when he rushed to the oil production plant before, Wang Ling took Sun Dehu and other 9 people alone, got on the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle in advance, and rushed to the battlefield at an extremely fast speed. At this time, the war was in full swing in the Allied base. The team from another Allied base was now desperately fighting the enemy. Although they were very passive on the whole, no one was willing to give up. The soldiers were also a little surprised when they saw an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle suddenly rush in and 10 people jump out of it. There are reinforcements. Brother, which team are you in? During the battle, the captain of the coalition team took a moment to ask after a round of strafing. While adjusting the electromagnetic launch device, Wang Ling glanced at it and replied, "Coalition base, captain of the wolf team, Wang Ling. I happened to be harassing the enemy troops nearby. When I saw you launching an attack, I came to join in the fun. I happened to see these enemies have been unhappy for a long time. Wolf squad. Ha ha ha, okay, you came just in time, we are short of manpower." The captain of the opposing squad smiled wildly, and followed the troops to kill 2 allied soldiers who were spitting fire snakes, and then looked back. "I am the captain of the Hound team, Sun Chiming. Brothers, I thank you for coming to help, but are there too few of you? This Sun Chiming is also a 3-star elite. As the captain of a small team, he obviously has rich combat experience. His military rank has also reached the level of sergeant, only 1 level lower than Wang Ling. This person is quite down to earth and can be quite tricky with his words. Even in the current battle situation, he does not forget to find fault. The war is urgent, and there are currently only 10 soldiers in the Wolf squad sitting on anti-aircraft tracked vehicles, so the number is naturally sparse. However, Wang Ling didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, "Captain Sun, don't underestimate our wolf squad. The main force is still behind. We came here in advance to relieve the siege." While they were talking, 2 Grizzly tanks rushed up from the Allied base, trying to bombard the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. However, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle temporarily retreated to the side. Instead, Wang Ling led Sun Dehu and others forward and opened fire violently. The firepower of 9 3-star elite mobilization troops is no joke, not to mention the magnetic blast infantry of Wang Ling, a 5-star special forces soldier. Under such a strong offensive, the 2 Grizzly tanks could not hold out for a few seconds. He was blown away in just one breath. When Sun Chiming saw this scene, he was shocked. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 175. He couldn't help but be surprised. The number of people coming from the Wolf team was not large, but the firepower they unleashed in an instant was no worse than that of the Hound team, and even exceeded it. The only two magnetic blast infantrymen left in the Hound team were also stunned. The highest level among them was a 1-star veteran. Although the electromagnetic attack was powerful, it was not much stronger than the conscripts. But the powerful electromagnetic attack launched by Wang Ling was very strong and powerful, and the range of the electricity was beyond their expectations. The power, range, and rate of fire were also far above them. The Grizzly tank was hit by this electromagnetic attack. Attack and blood volume are dropping rapidly. Such destructive power made the two magnetic blast infantrymen swallow their saliva. "Don't be dazed, keep fighting, the battle has just begun." When Wang Ling accidentally saw their expressions, he lowered his face and shouted. This shout finally woke up the people in the Hound team, and they quickly devoted themselves to the battle. The fire of the firearms in their hands kept shooting. Not to be outdone, the tanks followed Sun Chiming's orders and did not go too deep. They always stayed close to the Hound team soldiers and blocked the approaching tanks. Although this style of play is a bit wretched, it is this wretched style of play that allows the members of the Hound team to survive as much as possible. However, this is inside the Allied base after all. Although it is only the most fringe area, the enemy can mobilize large numbers of teams to encircle and suppress it at any time. The situation is quite unfavorable for them. During this period, 10 of Wang Ling's group also encountered a group of more than 20 Allied soldiers to encircle and suppress them. As soon as the two sides met, they quickly exchanged fire. Most of this group of Allied soldiers are new recruits, but the Wolf team is composed of 3-star elites, and there is also the presence of Wang Ling, the god of death. The firepower burst out. Even though there are half fewer people than the opponent, there is no trace of it. There was no sign of weakness, and even with Wang Ling's massive continuous electric attack, this group of Allied soldiers had suffered enough. What made them gnash their teeth with hatred the most was the Wolf Squad's anti-aircraft tracked vehicle. When they set out, Wang Ling gave them orders to avoid enemy attacks as much as possible, avoid all tanks and defensive buildings, and focus on attacking enemy infantry. No, remember this order. Facing the Allied team of 20 people, these two anti-aircraft crawler vehicles also launched a surprise attack from one side. Originally relying on their numerical advantage, this group of Allied soldiers could barely match Wang Ling and the other 10 soldiers. However, the addition of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles immediately tipped the scales seriously. The team of more than 20 people, in the next short period of time, all were annihilated within a short period of time. On the other hand, among Wang Ling's 10 people, only 2 were killed, 2 were seriously injured, and 5 were slightly injured. Although the Wolf Squad had an advantage in this comparison, Wang Ling's eyes also filled with anger as he watched his elites die in battle. Coincidentally, at this time, the 3 faster Rhino tanks in the Wolf Squad also arrived on the battlefield. Although 3 Rhinos are not too many, 2 of them have reached the 3-star elite level. Their fierce firepower is really eye-catching. However, after the 3 Rhino tanks arrived, they did not charge. Instead, they surrounded Wang Ling and the others, attracting firepower and resisting the Allied attacks. With the addition of these 3 Rhino tanks, the pressure on Wang Ling and the others was greatly reduced. Although the encirclement and suppression by the surrounding Allied forces presented a steady stream, they were always able to repel or even annihilate them with powerful firepower. Even the Hound team also benefited from this, which greatly relieved the battle pressure, and even vaguely leaned towards the Wolf team to join the team for warmth. Once the battle starts, it is difficult to stop, not to mention that whether it is Sun Chiming or Wang Ling of the Hound team, they all want to overwhelm this Allied base. Under the resistance, the Allied offensive troops retreated steadily, and time passed quietly with the resistance. After such a long time, 4 of Wang Ling's original 10 people had lost their lives. The unleveled Rhino tank was blown up. One of the 2 Samsung elites had half health and the other had half health. The situation of the Hound team is even more grim. Less than 40% of the originally mighty team is now left. If this trend continues, the two teams will be in danger. Rumble. Rumble. However, at this moment, the Wolf team's biggest killers, two 3-star elite Apocalypse tanks, finally arrived on the battlefield. The destructive power of the 3-star Apocalypse was even more terrifying. Wang Ling and the others were originally facing an encirclement and suppression attack by two groups of dozens of people and 5 or 6 grizzly tanks. However, after the two Apocalypse tanks arrived, the pair of twin cannons, however, explosive artillery shells were fired one after another from the tube. Almost all infantry were killed if they touched it. Even the grizzly tank could not withstand even 4 consecutive artillery shells bombarded by an Apocalypse. The entire encirclement and suppression team was torn apart almost instantly. Huge opening. Good guy, you came at the right time. Beat me hard and take as many heads as you come. Seeing the Apocalypse tank, Wang Ling also felt emboldened. He shouted, and with the firepower of the Apocalypse tank, the remaining encirclement and suppression teams, they were all annihilated soon after. After the Hound team saw these two 3-star Apocalypse tanks, their expressions suddenly became strange. They seemed a little envious and a little frightened. However, with the outbreak of the Apocalypse tanks and the annihilation of this round of siege, the Hound team, the team suddenly became ecstatic. Sun Chiming even laughed out loud, "Captain Wang, I didn't expect that the Wolf squad would have such a powerful weapon. With these two 3-star Apocalypse tanks, I don't believe that we can't hurt this allied base." Although the Hound team also has an Apocalypse tank, after such a long battle, it has only been promoted to the 1-star level. At best, the speed of firing the shells is faster. Compared with the 3-star elite, the destructive power is more than 1.5 stars behind. To Sun Chiming's expectation, Wang Ling didn't take the compliment at all, and even took a moment to glare at him, hitting the allied base. "This is not my purpose, I want to push it directly. Kill! Kill! Kill!" As Wang Ling finished speaking, a large number of members of the Wolf squad finally arrived on the battlefield. The shouts of death soaring into the sky made the soldiers in the allied base turn pale. The Hound team watched the dozens of people arriving. After being stunned for a while, they also showed expressions of ecstasy. Among them, Sun Chiming was the strongest. After a hearty laugh, he shouted, "Wolf squad, great job. With so many soldiers participating in the battle, I don't believe we can't push this allied base." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 176. Although the Hound team has suffered heavy casualties, Sun Chiming is now sincerely excited, and his heart is particularly hot. Who doesn't want to make military exploits? When the Hound team came to attack the Allied base, they wanted to overthrow it. However, due to their lack of troops and the enemy's heavy firepower, they gradually gave up on this idea and only thought about can hurt the Allies before retreating. However, just when they were frustrated, the Wolf team came. Dozens of 3-star elites, dozens of recruits and 1-star veterans, plus 2 3-star anti-aircraft tracked vehicles, 2 3-star rhinoceros tanks, and 2 3-star elite Apocalypse tanks. This kind of lineup and firepower it gave them a lot of confidence, and the original plan was finally brought to mind again. Since the war has begun on this Allied base, let's get rid of it. Wang Ling and all members of the Wolf squad also had this idea. After the large forces arrived, under the powerful firepower, all the Allied troops who came to encircle and suppress suffered heavy losses, causing the entire Allied base to panic. My flesh hurts. As for the company that has been resisting until now, the number of active troops in this yellow Allied base has dropped sharply. It is impossible to replenish troops in a short time. The strength of the troops who came to encircle and suppress them is also getting smaller and smaller. Even for a while, it was impossible to continue to mobilize manpower to besiege. At this time, the time for the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad to fight back has finally arrived. "Brothers, hit me hard." Sun Chiming, the leader of the Hound team, was frustrated. He shouted, almost hysterical. The Hound team also changed its previous stubborn attitude and began to march towards the interior of the Allied base, dismantling all the buildings that could be touched, and wiped out those alone Allied troops. But looking at their momentum, Wang Ling gritted his teeth and shouted quickly, "Captain Sun, don't charge so hard. The threat from the light prism tower is still there. First, cut off the power to the base and clean up the remaining soldiers." Although Sun Chiming was high, he did not lose his mind. When he heard what Wang Ling said, his eyes lit up. What a great idea! "Brothers, dismantle the power plant first." Wang Ling breathed a sigh of relief after seeing the Hound team change their attack target. As long as the power is cut off, this Allied base will be equivalent to losing its minions. The combat effectiveness and defensive strength will immediately decrease sharply, and then the attack will be more successful. Then let's not be idle, brothers, fight me. First demolish the power plant and the machine gun bunker. The Hound squadron began to attack, and the Wolf squadron naturally would not be left behind. Following Wang Ling's order, the entire team they all took action, and all the power plants that were within reach were pushed over one after another. The Allied bases controlled by the system still have the same old problem. As long as the power is enough, they will never spend extra money to build power plants to store excess power before suffering big losses. It is precisely because of the existence of this old problem that the power storage of this base is currently very stretched. After the Wolf team and the Hound team destroyed several power plants one after another, the entire base lost power supply in an instant, and the light prism tower the rotation stopped, the spy satellite paused, and even the crack generator lost its function. Those shrouded unexplored areas were finally gradually revealed on the electronic map under the coalition radar. It can be observed from the map that the current yellow base is also very large in scale, with a large number of various buildings and a huge area. However, many of the troops in this base were killed in the encirclement and suppression just now, and the interior seemed somewhat empty. Only the troops who had not yet had time to join the war were still gathering, and it seemed that they wanted to continue to launch the encirclement and suppression. However, the entire Wolf team arrived and cut off the power of the Allied forces. Wang Ling did not take these troops to heart yet, and immediately continued to command the team to start the general attack. In terms of fighting style, Wang Ling continued to adhere to that immoral and wretched concept. Even though the power supply to the Allied base had been cut off, he was still sparing no effort to dismantle the power plant, as if he wanted to beat it to death with a stick. Give it time to breathe. During this period, they occasionally encountered obstruction by Allied troops, but under their powerful firepower, all the blocking Allied troops were quickly defeated. Even the machine gun bunkers they encountered along the way were also suppressed by Tiankai. The tank was completely destroyed by the bombardment of 4 explosive shells, and the entire team showed an unstoppable posture. Seeing the Wolf squad storming and dismantling the Allied base with great speed, the Hound squad was greatly stimulated. Sun Chiming touched his head and then hurriedly ordered, "Brothers, work harder. We are not many in number, but we cannot lose them." The Hound team also refused to admit defeat. After hearing this, they responded one after another, and then continued to increase their firepower output, but the destruction speed was still not as good as that of the Wolf team. During the disassembly, the Wolf squad also gradually penetrated deep into the Allied base, pushing through all the power plants and machine gun bunkers along the way, and wiping out all the Allied troops they encountered. The momentum was so fierce that it was simply eye-catching. As they went deeper, they finally encountered a defensive force deep in the Allied base. A beam of light was launched from a distance, killing several seriously injured members of the Wolf team in an instant. From the electronic map, after checking, It turned out that it was a light tank that made a sneak attack under the cover of a group of Allied soldiers in the distance. "Damn it, blow it up for me," Wang Ling was furious, with a mentality of only allowing me to tear you down and not allowing you to fight back. As his order was issued, one of the 3-star Apocalypse tanks broke away from the team alone and penetrated deep into the enemy's interior. Braving the firepower of a group of Allied soldiers, it blasted the light tank with 4 rounds in a row. Then he didn't want to fight, ignored the Allied soldiers who were fighting back, and turned around and went back. It ran away, but the group of Allied soldiers were not happy. They all released their deployment status and tried to catch up with the Apocalypse tank. But before they could catch up with the Apocalypse tanks, 2 3-star anti-aircraft tracked vehicles were shot out halfway. They fired at them randomly and the group of Allied soldiers were completely wiped out before they could organize a counterattack. Chirp. Just after the group of soldiers had been wiped out, Wang Ling had not yet calmed down. He suddenly heard a sharp sound of cannons, and then saw a raging fire suddenly ignited on the body of a recruit in the team, and he let out a hysterical sound. The screams were simply frightening to hear. The comrades around him wanted to rescue him, but they couldn't intervene at all. They could only watch his life count down with red eyes. Wang Ling was quite familiar with the scene from playing games. He glared and glanced around. Chirp. And when he was scanning, the tree next to a huge rock not far away suddenly turned into the shape of a tank. When a special shell was fired, a 3-star elite conscript of the wolf team who was full of blood was immediately killed. Beaten to residual blood. Different dimension. Red alert world. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 177. Watching the scene helplessly, Wang Ling stared angrily, identified the target, and shouted hysterically, "Damn, that tree was blown to pieces by me." In response to his order, the half-blooded elite Rhino tank in the team immediately broke away from the team, aimed at the tree and started firing wildly. After being hit by the Rhino tank's shell, the tree could no longer maintain its camouflage state. It immediately returned to the tank form and turned its body around, as if it wanted to counterattack the Rhino tank. But the firepower of this 3-star Rhino tank was too strong, and the tree's armor and life were a bit fragile. As a result, the car body just turned around and was completely blown away before even a single shell could be fired. This tree is naturally the Allied Phantom tank. As mentioned before, this kind of tank will disguise itself as a tree when stationary to confuse the enemy. Its shells are very lethal to infantry and tanks. Although it seems a bit useless when attacking a city, it is very effective when defending. It is often difficult for the confused enemy to find out where to attack. By the time they figure it out, the team's casualties are already considerable. This is because Wang Ling was so familiar with the Phantom tank, the sound and the flames when soldiers died, that he immediately thought of the Phantom tank, quickly found its disguised location, and finally destroyed it at the cost of 1 death and 1 injury. If it were another team, and the situation was unclear, the losses would probably not be small. Although it is said that there will inevitably be sacrifices in war, Wang Ling's eyes turned red when he saw these comrades dying in action. He waved his hand and ordered, "All the seriously injured people should hide behind them, and those who are full of blood should be in front. Try your best to survive for me." This kind of order, if it comes from the mouths of other team captains, may be somewhat awkward. After all, for the sake of victory in the war, which team leader does not order the team to charge without fear of death? But when Wang Ling said this, it seemed very natural. It is true that Wang Ling also cares about the outcome of the war, but he also values the lives of his soldiers equally. The war must be won, but the loss of manpower must not be too many. This is Wang Ling's plan. With the current combat effectiveness of the Wolf Squad and Wang Ling's game experience, there is no problem in attacking an allied base commanded by the system, but it will also cause a large number of casualties in the end, which is a scene Wang Ling does not want to see. If the Hound team hadn't taken the lead today and attracted a lot of firepower, Wang Ling wouldn't have taken action even if he could push the base. The seriously injured members of the Wolf Squad were reluctant to hear the order, but their own situation was too bad after all, so they did not hold on and fell to the back of the team, using the cover of their comrades to fire their guns. The battle is still going on and getting more and more intense. After all, the Hound team took the lead in attracting too much firepower. Now the number of remaining soldiers has dropped sharply, making fighting a bit difficult. But after all, after fighting for such a long time, many people in the team have been promoted to 3-star elites. Even the Apocalypse tank, which had already lost its health and was about to be destroyed, finally entered the elite level in the last step. The instantly strengthened the self-healing ability and astonishing destructive power turned the tide of the battle almost instantly, greatly strengthening the firepower of the Hound team. They rushed all the way, but became more and more courageous as they fought. The Wolf team was even worse. There were already many 3-star elites, and even 2 big killers opened the way. They rushed all the way and crushed all the power plants, machine gun bunkers and allied troops within the range of fire. They were all hunted. Kill, rampage, plow the court and sweep the holes. The area of this yellow allied base is certainly large, but no matter how big it is, there is a limit. The Wolf team pushed all the way and finally penetrated the entire allied base not long after. Through the electronic map, it can be found that after this round of pushback, the allied base is now seriously damaged. Nearly 80% of all power plants have been pushed down, making it difficult to provide even a small amount of electricity. Among the remaining defense forces, there are only 4 or 5 machine gun bunkers left, 2 of which are at one side of the intersection. The Allied forces also suffered a devastating blow, with less than 20% remaining and still at a loss. They resisted stubbornly, but they completely lost the power to turn the tide of the battle. Now this base is finished. However, there is a war now. No one has any sympathy or mercy towards the Allied base, whether it is the Wolf team or the Hound team. After completely destroying the Allied base, what is left is the entire general. Its destruction. To this end, Wang Ling also divided the Wolf squad into several teams. Apocalypse tanks and anti-aircraft crawlers continued to roam the entire Allied base, dismantling the remaining power plants and cleaning up the remaining Allied troops. The 2 Rhino tanks formed a separate team and pushed all the Allied buildings within reach of the firepower. The group of mobilization soldiers was also divided into 3 teams, and they were dismantling the buildings in the Allied base. Anyway, the Allied base can no longer resist, so spread out the team as much as possible and destroy it as quickly as possible. This style of play can be said to be clearly a grab for battle glory. When Sun Chiming of the Hound team noticed it, his face turned dark. "Captain Wang, you are too disrespectful to me. Our Hound team was the first to attack." "Ah. But Wang Ling is not close to him now, and he is still busy pushing forward Allied bases. How can he care about what he thinks now?" After muttering, Sun Chiming gritted his teeth and shouted, "Guys, don't lose to them, tear them apart one by one." The Hound team was also in high spirits now. They especially liked this order, and they started working in full swing. The Allied base, which was originally like a steel fortress, collapsed under the attack of these 2 coalition teams and was quickly eroded. All the major buildings in the base were bombed one after another in a short period of time. The Hound team now also has a lot of firepower, but it pales in comparison to the Wolf team, and its disassembly speed is far behind them. The Wolf team didn't care at all about the Hound team's anxious eyes and continued to fire with all their might. Wang Ling led a team of more than 10 people alone and demolished too many Allied buildings along the way. Then he saw a combat laboratory surrounded by walls. In the game, ordinary infantrymen have no way to access the wall. They cannot attack the buildings or enemy troops inside the wall through the wall. They can only rely on tanks to dismantle the wall to reach the enemy behind the wall. However, there are exceptions to one category of arms, such as magnetic blast infantry. The electromagnetic blast infantry of the Samsung Elite can launch an electromagnetic attack with a certain arc, which can happen to cross the wall and attack the enemy. And Wang Ling is now a 5-star Special Forces soldier, and his electromagnetic attack is sharper and more flexible. The current wall can't stop him at all, so he opened fire alone. Under the powerful electromagnetic attack, only the Allied warfare laboratory can be seen. The blood bar on the weapon dropped rapidly, and it was finally successfully blown up, exposing 2 or 3 of the working infantrymen. However, Wang Ling beat the rabbits with grass and electrocuted them all to death through the wall. Wang Ling will not be lenient at all when dealing with enemy troops. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 178. Keep demolishing. I will demolish everything except the command post. No one will be left alive. After destroying the Allied combat laboratory, Wang Ling waved his hand and shouted. The members of the Wolf team increased their firepower one after another. Hit the Allied base mercilessly. After the Hound team heard this, they were not to be outdone. Sun Chiming also shouted, "Brothers, don't leave them behind, beat them hard." Although the Hound team is now outnumbered, after fighting for so long, the remaining personnel and tanks have basically been promoted to the 3-star elite level. The overall firepower and momentum are not weak at all, but the attack speed is still slow after all. Not as good as the Wolf squad. The already dilapidated Allied base was trembling even more under the tyrannical attack of these two teams. The steel fortress-like base became the main battlefield, and almost everywhere was filled with smoke, as if telling the story of war. Cruel and intense. And those two teams were obviously determined to completely destroy the space. They started with extremely ruthless attacks. One building after another, they were pushed aside one after another. A quite powerful Allied base. In the end, he was beaten like a storm by these two teams. It lasted for a long time, and almost all the buildings in this base were pushed aside, leaving only the central command post. It is true that a command post is the core of the entire base, but if only this polished commander is left, it will have no combat effectiveness. If you want to push it away, whether it is the Wolf squad or the Hound squad, it will be effortless. A waste of effort. However, after all Wang Ling's previous orders, after the Wolf squad destroyed other buildings and troops in the Allied base, they only surrounded but did not attack, scattered around the command post and stood still. Although the Hound team didn't understand Wang Ling's plan, they didn't take the initiative to blow up the command post. They just approached the Wolf team, and Captain Sun Chiming asked, "Captain Wang, this is the only polished commander left. If you don't blow it up, why keep it?" After this large-scale battle, Sun Chiming's eyes became more determined, and his dust-covered face also exuded masculinity and bloodiness. Sun Chiming is not a simple person who dares to attack this Allied base. Wang Ling wiped the dark marks on his face, licked the corners of his mouth, and looked at the Allied command post with a greedy look. "What else can we do? Of course we occupy it." That's right, Wang Ling had already made this plan when the war was going smoothly. After all, Wang Ling was greedy for the many types of arms in the Allied forces. He had experience in switching arms, and he really wanted to experience the Allied arms. The prerequisite for the experience is that the coalition must also have these arms, so what is most needed at the moment is to occupy an Allied base. After hearing this, Sun Chiming's eyes also lit up. What a great idea! This base has been destroyed, and only a command post is left. It has no resistance at all. Instead of blowing it up, it is better for us to occupy it. What a great idea, what an idea! Wang Ling smiled and didn't answer anything. He just shouted from the radio, Brother Zhao, send an engineer quickly, quickly." In this case, the purpose of asking the base for engineers is naturally self-evident. King Xiaoping was also a little surprised by Wang Ling's ambition, but Major General Li Wiki was particularly interested. He chuckled and said, "It's interesting. Do you want to occupy the Allied base and obtain Allied technology? Okay, sure, hurry up and use air defense. The crawler truck carries an engineer there, but things will change later." "Hey, that's good." After King Xiaoping agreed, he hurried out to take care of things. Not long after, an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle carrying an engineer rushed out of the base in a hurry. Watching this scene in the map video, Major General Li Wiki felt particularly happy. Whether we can capture the Allied command post or not, this Allied base is finished. This Wang Ling gave me a big surprise. This time, even Rovitsky had to admit, yes, it's really surprising. Such a risky approach actually allowed them to win. Major General Li Wiki nodded, yes, although it was a bit risky, the result is quite surprising. No wonder the war on the original battlefield of Xiaozhou and the others ended so quickly. With a fool like Wang Ling here, the war was, can the pace not be fast? Now, the Allied forces only have 3 bases left on this battlefield. The balance has been broken. In the next battle, the Allied forces will gradually become passive. On the battlefield, where the yellow Allied base was located, Wang Ling didn't know that it had just been discussed. He was still staring at the Allied command post with no concealment of greed in his eyes. He has even imagined a scene where he transforms into a time travel warrior. Although the battlefield is large, he can move at will. Even being promoted to the 10-star Soldier King, bringing this ability to the real world, and using this teleportation skill that is almost a superpower in reality, it feels so exciting. "Hey, brother, when you eat the meat, you have to leave a mouthful of soup for us." Sun Chiming also looked forward to it vaguely. "After the construction and development of the Allied technologies, remember to share them with us. If we integrate the technologies of the 2 camps, then this battle for hegemony will be nothing without the Allies. Must." Wang Ling also smiled very proudly, and now this Allied command post seemed to be in his pocket. Observing the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle already carrying engineers on the electronic map, Wang Ling felt sincere expectations. In anticipation, a few hours passed quickly, and the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle finally arrived. After the engineer got off the car, Wang Ling and Sun Chiming couldn't wait to urge him to hurry up and occupy the Allied base. The engineer didn't know how to do it, and he was about to rush into the Allied command post with his toolbox. But just as he was about to enter, he suddenly heard a loud boom, and then the command post exploded in front of them. Looking at the wreckage of the command post that was scattered in all directions due to the explosion and drew lines of fire in the air, whether it was Wang Ling or Sun Chiming, even the engineers and all the soldiers present, they were all stunned, and they were speechless for a moment. I can understand what is going on. But those flying wreckage didn't care about their eyes at all. After shining brilliantly in the air, they finally gradually fell to the ground. The bang-bang sound seemed to be roaring and mocking at them. This Allied base was so decisive right now that it blew itself up at the moment it was about to be occupied. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 179. In the Allied command post, Major General Li Wiki was always staring at the map video. When he saw the Allied command post self-destructing at the last moment, even his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. While the tracked vehicle was marching, Xiaoping Wang had also returned to the command post. After seeing the scene just now, he immediately clicked his tongue and shook his head. It's a pity, it's just a little bit worse. If it were faster, it would be better. Allied technology is ours. Rovitsky disagreed. Come on, no matter how fast you are, the Allied base will explode before you do. Hey, I know it too, but I just can't swallow this breath. Zhao Pingwang clenched his fists and looked annoyed. If we can really occupy and obtain allied technology, then all the coalition forces will benefit, not to mention our place. The battle for hegemony will also end early. This game setting is actually relatively balanced in terms of the combat effectiveness of the arms. No matter which force the coalition or the allied forces are, they have their own unique combat arms. The two are constrained. Without a cunning command, neither side dares to claim that it can defeat them. Overwhelm the enemy. However, once one of the parties is able to seize the enemy's technology and integrate it into its own troops, after adapting, the combat effectiveness will soar in a short period of time, truly affecting the balance of forces between the two sides, thus promoting the rapid end of the battle for hegemony. Naturally, with such consequences before our eyes, neither the Allies nor the coalition will let the enemy succeed easily. The explosion at the Allied command post just now is an example. Major General Li Wiki knew these truths well. Although he was a little regretful, he was not too unwilling. He just smiled and said, "The Allies will not be stupid enough to let their own technology leak. Wang Ling's idea is worthy of commendation and very important. It's worth trying, but you have also seen that the Allied forces have a very tough attitude towards this. They would rather blow up the command post than leave it to us. So, there is no need to be angry." After a pause, Li Wiki looked at the wolf team in the video, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Except for the Allied command post, all other Allied troops and buildings have been wiped out. The yellow Allied base has been officially removed. There are only 3 Allied forces opposing us on this battlefield. So, the Wolf Squad fought beautifully in this battle. After talking for a while, Zhao Pingwang finally looked away, smiled and said, "Haha, yes. This time, the Wolf team really hurt the Allies, directly destroying an Allied foundation. It was like knocking on the mountain and shaking the tiger." Rovitsky rolled his eyes at him. "You are so proud of this, and it was not you who ordered the fight. Hey, look away, you have to speak with your conscience in mind. Although I didn't personally direct it, Wang Ling and I come from the same place." Seeing the two of them arguing, Major General Li Wiki did not interrupt, but just smiled happily. After the coalition radar was established, each team in the base also had the authority to view the electronic map. Wang Ling led his team to storm the coalition base before and after, and all the teams in the base could see it. At first, many of them were surprised and even worried. Some radicals scolded Wang Ling for being reckless, and a few even sneered at him. However, as the Wolf Squad established a foothold in the Allied base and launched a strong counterattack, these strange sounds finally died out, and even more people were vaguely looking forward to it. It was not until the end that the command post exploded and the Allied base was officially annihilated. The group of people watching the battle were filled with joy. An extremely relieved and happy feeling rippled in everyone's hearts. After a very short silence, the entire base suddenly there was a deafening cheer. Although they only demolished an Allied base, this was quite shocking on this battlefield that had been in stalemate for too long. Beautiful, happy. Ha ha ha, well done, well done. Captain Wang, well done. My dear, is the Wolf Squad so strong? A whole Allied base, cooperating with another squad, just pushed away like this. Captain Wang Ling is really a god. He has only been here for a short time and he has achieved such military exploits. I admire him, I admire him. Not only them, but even the coalition base commanded by Luo Er burst into cheers at this moment. After all, their team was also the one pushing the Allied base. In their hearts, the image of Sun chiming of the Hound team was instantly raised several notches. Your grandma is a bitch. What kind of aphrodisiacs did the Allies give you? It's so unbearable that you would rather self-destruct than be occupied, you bastards. While the base was cheering for joy, on the battlefield, Wang Ling looked at the ruins of the command post and couldn't help but cursed. Even because he was so angry, his curses were somewhat inconsistent. With this roar, the previous illusions were shattered in an instant. Could he not be angry? Moreover, it can be seen from the behavior of the space that the Allied forces are still quite taboo about the occupation of the command post. They would rather die together than hand over their own technology, and their attitude is very determined. Looking at this, it will be difficult to occupy the Allied command post in the future. Wang Ling had a bitter look on his face, and his heart was filled with resentment. It seems that the idea of transforming into a space warrior in the illusion can only be a fantasy. Such a small distance turned out to be the gap between fantasy and reality. This gap was so big that it was difficult for Wang Ling to accept it for a while. It was clear that he had won a great victory, but he showed such an expression afterwards, which made the soldiers around him feel a little resentful. Sun Chiming also scratched his head. Although he was a little reluctant, he was more open-minded than Wang Ling and did not complain about anything in the end. Just when Wang Ling was a little disappointed, he suddenly noticed that the level of magnetic blast infantry began to loosen again. He was slowly promoted from the original 5-star special forces to the 7-star ace. As he advanced in level, his mind seemed to be baptized by experience books, and his body was also slightly strengthened. Of course, the most obvious enhancement was his weapon, which ranged from 5 stars to 7 stars. Wang Ling could clearly feel that the electromagnetic launcher in his hand was more powerful than before. It is difficult to improve things like level the further you go, but Wang Ling directly led his team to push through an entire Allied base. The experience accumulated in this process is naturally enough for him to be promoted to the 7-star ace. Although he lost an Allied command post and Allied technology, in the end, he became Wang Ling. From a 5-star special forces soldier to a 7-star ace, the span in between is really not small. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 180. Feeling the changes in his body and seeing the strengthening of the electromagnetic device on hand, Wang Ling's original resentment for missing out on Allied technology faded a lot at this time. Rather than looking forward to technologies that do not belong to one's own forces, it is better to maximize the power that is currently available, which can also burst out powerful combat effectiveness and destructive power. After looking away, Wang Ling's face finally looked better, and he had time to observe the battlefield and team conditions. Many settings in the Red Alert world also follow the principles of the game. Numerous corpses and wreckage will not remain on the battlefield for a long time. By this time, most of the corpses and remains have disappeared. But the pitted ground here, the scorched black color of gunpowder, and the smell of gunpowder smoke everywhere bear witness to the big battle just now, and they seem to be telling the tragedy of the war invisibly. This battle could be said to have been a very smooth one. The two teams combined to overwhelm an entire powerful Allied base. However, the cost of doing so is also not small. After the battle, the number of members of the Wolf Squad was reduced by 40%, with only about 40 people left. One Rhino tank was also destroyed, and the remaining 2 tanks were at half health or with residual health. On the other hand, the Apocalypse tanks and anti-aircraft crawlers are strong and have relatively more health. Most of the soldiers who died were new recruits, including many former comrades from the 5th Company. This situation also made Wang Ling feel painful in his heart. However, among the remaining recruits, quite a few have successfully been promoted to the 3-star elite level with this battle, greatly enhancing their survivability on the battlefield. Nowadays, in the Wolf Squad, the number of pure recruits is getting smaller and smaller, and the number of elites is getting more and more. This can be considered a great blessing among misfortunes. On the other hand, the situation of the Hound team was even worse. Less than 30% of the originally mighty team remained. Nearly all the tanks were destroyed, leaving only one Apocalypse tank with half health. However, the remaining soldiers have all been promoted to the 3-star elite level. With this foundation, Sun Chi will be able to pull the Hound team together sooner or later. All in all, this battle was worth fighting. When Wang Ling didn't express himself deliberately, others had no idea about Wang Ling's promotion again. After being stunned for a while, the engineer also darkened his face. I thought it was a pretty simple task, and there was no resistance at all. The command post of ability cannot be occupied without occupying it, but this. Although the engineer would disappear if he could capture the command post, in contrast, he was still upset about not completing the mission, and Wang Ling was amused for a while. Seeing Wang Ling change his expression, Sun De, who also breathed a sigh of relief, smiled awkwardly, and said with relief, "There's nothing we can do about it." Who knew they were so desperate? Sun Chiming of the Hound team took a few breaths and glanced around. Whether it is occupied or not, this base has been destroyed by us. Captain Wang, if you have time in the future, are you interested in having a drink together? Wang Ling was not polite. Okay, when the war is over, I won't come back until I'm drunk. Although he knew that Sun Chiming was just a virtual character created by the system, after fighting together for so long, the two of them had gone through life and death. Wang Ling still valued that fiery brotherly love. The Allied base was destroyed, and the war was temporarily over. After Wang Ling and others took a short rest, they did not want to stay here any longer. After all, this place is still close to the Allied forces' sphere of influence. In this not too distant place, there are 3 Allied bases of the same size that are eyeing them and cannot stay at all. However, just when Wang Ling was about to retreat and was about to give an order, he suddenly noticed that from the blue Allied base closest to here, 3 multifunctional infantry vehicles suddenly rushed out, followed by the Phantom tanks, Grizzly tanks, and even a large number of Allied soldiers rushed out from the rear. Looking at the momentum, they were obviously heading for this mountain. With this Allied base taking the lead, the other 2 Allied bases also sent teams of the same size, rushing towards this direction aggressively. Taking advantage of the massive loss of personnel after the war between the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad, these 3 bases came to encircle and suppress you with the mentality of killing you while you are sick. Good guy, you are really good at calculating. However, you have missed the best battlefield. Is it possible for your team to swallow us up? Wang Ling smiled sinisterly and waved his hand. Brothers, prepare for battle. The 3 bases have already sent out troops. The old rule is that the seriously injured should stay at the back as much as possible, and the ones with full health should be in the front. All the Allied troops who come to encircle and suppress will be killed. I killed it. Wang Ling, instead of being afraid of this additional battle, was actually looking forward to it. Having just been promoted to 7-star ace, Wang Ling also really wanted to test the power of the magnetic blast infantry at this stage. As for the Hound team, they naturally observed the scene from the electronic map. They are now short of manpower, and the remaining elite personnel have not had time to recover their health. They are in a period of weakness. Many people wrinkled when they saw the enemy. Frowned. However, Sun Chiming was also a tough guy and refused to admit defeat at all. He shouted, "Brothers, there is another war. We have pushed back an entire Allied base. Now these encirclement and suppression troops are nothing. You are not fighting alone, join forces with the Wolf Squad and defeat them." If there were only the Hound team here, they would really be in despair. But who told us that there is still a Wolf team with a strong lineup here? Teaming up with the Wolf Squad, these encirclement and suppression troops, what else do they have to fear? After the 2 captains mobilized twice, the 2 teams instantly regained their passionate fighting spirit and quickly deployed according to the order, waiting for the upcoming battle. There was only one main road and 2 small roads on this mountain. Wang Ling personally led the team, leaving a 3-star Apocalypse tank, an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, and 20 mobilization troops to guard the main road. Sun De led another group of people to guard a small road. Sun Chiming took all the members of the Hound team, plus a few reinforcements from the Wolf team, to guard another path. After the deployment was completed, it was just waiting for the Allied troops to arrive. It seems that in the eyes of this Allied force, the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad were already in a period of weakness after the war, and they have regarded them as turtles in the urn. The team marched, not connected from end to end, and all the troops seemed to be scrambling to get there. Battlefield. The fastest ones were naturally those multifunctional infantry vehicles. Not long after Wang Ling took his position, the 3 infantry vehicles had already arrived. Wang Ling now occupies a geographical advantage, and the range is longer than usual. In addition, since he is already a 7-star ace, the distance will be longer. As a result, these infantry vehicles have just approached, and before anyone else can open fire, Wang Ling has already fired first. An extremely strong electromagnetic attack was launched from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain. After contacting one of the infantry vehicles, it branched and connected instantly. All 3 infantry vehicles were within his attack range. This sudden attack seemed to disrupt the rhythm of the 3 multifunctional infantry vehicles. After noticing the enemy, they wanted to rush forward and attack. However, Wang Ling's electromagnetic attack was really terrifying. After several consecutive attacks, the 3 vehicles, the infantry vehicle exploded almost at the same time.